Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be going over all of the best perks that you can possibly take to give yourself a fighting chance in Hazard 5. We'll briefly touch up on how to actually unlock perks and where the extra perk slots are located, but for the most part we're just going to be in the equipment terminal talking on the perks. So without further ado, let's get started. Perks are unlocked with perk points, shocking. You obtain these points from milestones. These milestones range pretty wildly, from crafting things in the forge, leveling up as every type of class, beating missions in general, beating secondary objectives, beating missions in every biome, beating every type of mission, and the specific secondary objectives and warnings. There's not too much to explain here. I will say that some of the easiest ones that you should focus on doing for multiple reasons is unlocking alternate weapons, playing all 4 classes, and buying the beers is a nice little bump in perk points as well that you might forget about. Additionally, cheap accessories can get you some points as well. The only one of these I feel any need to explain is the collect Dystrum secondary objective. Dystrum only spawns on point extractions and refinery. So if for some reason you want to focus on this milestone, make sure you're looking at point extractions and refinery. And just to gloss over the perk tree real quick, in tier 4 we have your first passive perk slot, well, your second I suppose, your first unlockable one, and in the 9th tier we have the second, third passive perk slot. I would loosely say that you should probably have both of these passive perk slots unlocked before you try to foray into Hazard 5, but I'm not going to gatekeep you. If you feel like you can swing it with just 2 passive perks, you're more than welcome to try. Just know that it's a pretty significant increase in power, and you'll definitely feel the difference once you have it. So without any more hesitation, let's jump feet first. Deep Pockets lets you carry 15 more of every type of mineral or anything that goes in your pockets in the game. This ranges from Bulu Caps to fossils to Morkite and Nitra. If you take this in conjunction with the mineral pouch on your armor, you can carry 60 of every mineral type. This is one of multiple perks that I'll refer to as a horrific vice, because while it is a very nice quality of life thing to have, there's certainly much more impactful perks that you can take instead of it. But once you start using it, you'll be very hard pressed to relinquish it, as it feels so nice to be able to fit a large vein into your pockets that you'll never want to go back to not being able to. Personally, I'd advise anyone who isn't using Deep Pockets currently to never try it because it will break you. And if you are using it, just know that the first step to recovery is admitting that you have a problem. I don't think Deep Pockets helps out very much on Hazard 5, although there's something to be said for it if you're playing Gunner and running far away from the Minehead or Mule and not wanting to make multiple trips. Many people make an argument for Deep Pockets being incredibly good on Scout because of how much time he spends ferrying minerals. I would say the opposite is true, in that Scout can reposition so quickly and often that he should be the one making 2 trips before any other class, but I can see the argument for having Scout carry 60 minerals. Next we have Veteran Depositor. This lets you deposit 50% faster and take slightly less damage while in a small radius around the Mule or Minehead. Focusing on these elements one at a time, the extra deposit speed is, nice, but much like Deep Pockets, it's not changing anything in your favor in a fight. Because once again, when we're talking about Hazard 5, realistically, the bulk of the difficulty of Hazard 5 is the bugs. The caves generate the same way on Haz 1 and Haz 5, so as long as you can traverse them quickly and efficiently, that's really not changing your gameplay, it's just getting you through the fights faster and back to exploring the caves. For this reason, I don't think Veteran Depositor is that impactful or something that you should really take. But to acknowledge what a lot of people will argue for it is the damage reduction you take while within proximity of a Mule or Minehead. And to kind of fight against that, I will say that fighting around Mineheads is probably one of the worst things you can possibly do, as the bug pathfinding gets very bizarre and they have a tendency to flip over and around the terrain, get inside of the rig's geometry, and just make things very bizarre and allow them to hit you when you might not expect them to. For this reason, I avoid fighting around Mineheads as much as possible, which goes directly against this perk. And the argument for fighting around Molly is a little bit more rational, as she's much smaller and much less in the way. However, I don't think that you should be thinking about actively kiting around the same area during a fight, and instead focus on actually taking the most efficient kiting route, which is usually large circles over a large area, with most classes aside from Scout who can flip over the bugs repeatedly. So all in all, once again, I don't think this perk is very good for Hazard 5 either. Sweet Tooth. 30% more healing from red sugar and a 20% movement speed boost for 10 seconds after consuming red sugar. Once again, elements one at a time, 30% more healing is pretty significant and can allow you to share more sugar with the rest of your team. If a whole team is running this perk at the same time, it makes red sugar go a lot further. This is the first one that I would kind of rationalize using on Hazard 5 because you do take a lot of damage and you want to stretch the healing as far as possible. When first getting into Hazard 5 and with a team that might be a little more shaky, I can definitely make a good argument for using this perk to help everyone stay on high health longer and more often. And as far as the movement speed boost, I don't think it's consistently available enough to be considered useful in a fight, which once again, when we're talking about Hazard 5, that's really the only thing that's relevant. I think if you were able to proc the movement speed boost without actually consuming any sugar, it would be extremely powerful, maybe even enough so to make it a mainline perk that a lot of people would use. Might be overpowered in a way, but currently the only way you actually get the movement speed boost is if you are actually missing health. So once again, if you're running down a tunnel on your way to the next cave and you're at full health, you're not going to be able to utilize this speed boost unless you injure yourself for it, which is a questionable strategy in my opinion, but interesting tech nonetheless. For that reason, I don't really think the movement speed bonus is something I consider when equipping Sweet Tooth. It's more just about the 30% healing, and if I can use the speed bonus in a relevant situation, then it's just a nice bonus, but I never go in expecting it. Resupplier. Here's the first one that would be considered meta. I think the community at large, as well as myself, can agree that this perk is pretty damn strong. It has 3 passive effects. First of all, you resupply 50% faster, taking your resupply down to 2.5 seconds. Now, if you were here for my armor spec video for Hazard 5, I briefly went over the interaction between breathing room on your armor and resupplies. If you take Resupplier and Breathing Room on your armor, whenever you revive, you'll be invincible for 6 seconds. This perk makes your resupplies only last 2.5 seconds, which, as I mentioned before, gives you ample time to run over to the resupply, and then get out of there by whatever means you can. As I'd recommend that every single person be running Breathing Room on their armor, in that way I would also recommend that everyone pick up Resupplier and see how it functions in conjunction with Breathing Room. And that's just the first passive effect. The second passive effect is you gain an extra 25% health when resupplying. If you're in a fight and say you have a moderate amount of health but not a lot of ammo, you can reasonably try to sneak a resupply with this perk, which will have its speed boosted already. But even if you're taking damage during the resupply, as long as your health doesn't go under 25%, you'll be capped out on health once you complete the resupply. And sure, you'll probably lose some health getting away from it, but overall, if you're starved for ammo and you have the health to burn, this is a great use of this perk. And as if those other 2 factors weren't enough, all weapons will be instantly reloaded on completion of the resupply. This can be extremely handy in a pinch with things like autocannon or breach cutter, as a kind of discount born ready, we'll get to that in a minute, to automatically skip a long reload duration on all of your weapons. For all of these reasons, I think Resupplier is absolutely one of the best, if not the best perk to take on Haz 5 starting out. Editor's note here, that originally, at the time of recording, this perk was bugged and didn't give you the additional carry speed. However, that's finally been fixed after about a year and a half of it being unpatched. So 25% faster movement speed when carrying heavy objects. This is pretty good overall, but not a make or break power in my opinion. But on its own, 50% less slowdowns is extremely powerful. Getting hit by slashers, goo bombers, and environmental effects in sandblasted corridors, glacial strata, magma core. This goes a long way and reduces a lot of frustration people have with getting slowed down. Personally, due to some other perks that I take, I don't find this very useful, but there's definitely a very good argument to be made for it, as it especially helps you get away from slashers whenever you get stabbed. Not a perk that I think I'd ever take with Scout, honestly though, just because of how often you have grappling hook to get out of slows. Vampire. Regain 5 health whenever you kill a medium or larger enemy. What is considered a medium or larger enemy is anything larger than a swarmer. So the only things that really don't qualify are parasites in the parasite mutation, swarmers, as I said, and nadocytes. Mactera spawns and grunts and anything larger than them will give you the health. This perk stands out exceptionally well on Driller, especially when running cryo cannon and barb drills, and to a lesser degree sludge pump as well. While this perk is relevant and decent on all classes, I think Driller exemplifies what it's really capable of with his incredibly powerful CC and throwing axes. In beginner to moderate levels of Hazard 5 play, I would only recommend taking this perk on Driller if you're running hard CC. However, it can be relevant on all classes if you combine it with Iron Will, which is an active perk that we'll talk about later. Strong Arm. Throw flares with 50% more force, and throw heavy objects with 20% more force. Pretty much does what it says on the tin. If you want to see the ceiling and you're short on a scout, take Strong Arm. I would probably only ever take this on point extraction, particularly if you have the Gunk Seed secondary. Even then, I'd be hard pressed to sell you to take it. When it comes to beating Hazard 5 missions, throwing a flare a little bit further isn't really going to save you, but it could definitely help out in the movement of a Quarks. Still, I think no matter what, you can always take a better perk than Strong Arm in your third slot. Friendly. Take and deal 50% less friendly fire damage. Even more simple than Strong Arm, you just do less damage to allies. If you're a rookie engineer who just got his hands on the Fat Boy overclock, this might be a good pick, so that your teammates don't bury you alive down there. However, unless you're afraid of getting griefed, I wouldn't ever advise anyone take friendly on Hazard 5 and just get better at not shooting your teammates. That said though, the friendly fire scaling is pretty brutal, so if you really can't keep your bullets out of your buddy's back, then consider equipping friendly. Elemental Insulation. 30% resistance to all elemental damage. This one's pretty strong. A lot of people feel very strongly about it, in that a lot of elemental damage types exist even in non-elemental biomes, such as Praetorian Spit, Acid Spitter shots, Corlock Sprout shots, and most environmental effects in the game. My underpinned issue with Elemental Insulation is that I wouldn't consider taking it on a biome that doesn't have extreme elemental effect issues. And when I really break down the biomes on what I would consider extreme elemental threats, Magma Core is the only one that comes to mind. So the way that I shake it out myself is that the only time I'm getting the full use out of this perk is in Magma Core. And as I'm a type of person that likes to set up my weapons and run 15 to 20 missions in a row without stopping, personally switching up perks in between missions just isn't for me. Elemental Insulation is extremely strong though, and if you find yourself getting massacred by environmental hazards, then it might be the perk for you. It definitely helps out when 1v1ing Praetorians or getting chunk shot in the back of the head by an Acid Spitter. I'm not trying to devalue this perk, it is incredibly strong, 30% damage resistance is very relevant, however I think the fact that it varies so wildly between biomes and the enemy composition you're up against makes it a very inconsistent perk. Second Wind. After sprinting for 4 seconds, gain a 12% sprint speed boost. I don't think I ever realized how little time I spent sprinting for more than 4 seconds until I tried to use this perk. There's just so many things going on in a combat situation that you just realistically cannot sprint for more than 4 seconds without performing another action, being it throwing a 180, turning around and shooting while flat-footed, stopping to interact with something, or just anything really. If you're not running in a straight line without making a sharp turn, then you aren't going to get the benefit of Second Wind. While it does have some benefit in getting between caves slightly more quickly, another perk we're going to take later on will help mitigate that greatly. For this reason, I'd throw Second Wind pretty low down in relevance in Hazard 5, and in general gameplay, I would definitely try to avoid this perk. Born Ready. After 5 seconds of being stowed, your weapons are automatically reloaded. This perk is what Elemental Insulation is to the biomes to your weapons. It varies greatly in power depending on the weapons you're using. Obviously, it favors weapons with longer reload times. Some of the greatest standout examples of this are Auto Cannon on the Gunner, Breach Cutter on the Engineer, and in my opinion, Corrosive Sludge Pump on the Driller, as that reload really feels like it takes a long time to me. Also noteworthy is it reloads everything that has a magazine, not just weapons. So if you're playing with Gunner and your zipline launcher is fired and then put away, it'll be reloaded by Born Ready. And if you're already running Born Ready for your autocannon, that's just a little extra icing on top. You can also trigger Born Ready by holding your pickaxe key for 5 seconds uninterrupted, reloading all 4 of your weapons at the same time. Once again though, it varies wildly depending on your weapons, but if you're running any long reload weapons, this is definitely one of the best perks for you to possibly run. And even if your weapons do have a shorter reload cycle, Born Ready is still an incredible perk for keeping your DPS up as you swap between your weapons. It's a bug thing. Loot bugs explode whenever you get close to them. This is a critical perk. Thorns. Any enemy that hits you will take 24 retaliation damage. Note that there is an internal cooldown of half a second on this, so if you get attacked by 5 swarmers all at the same time, only one of them is going to die. And then half a second later, when they all attack again, one more of them will die. So while this perk won't completely protect you from a swarm of ankle biters tearing you apart, every now and then the one swarmer that does reach you will die and you won't have to take your eyes off the major combat situation. There's very few builds in the game that I wouldn't recommend Thorns for, and even those builds could definitely do well with it, it's just that they don't really need it. The ones that immediately come to mind are Driller with Heat or Cold Radiance, Engineer where you have your turrets set up to protect you, and extreme AoE builds on Gunner such as Hurricane built for AoE, pretty much anything autocannon related, or bullet hell if you're some sort of maniac. But for any class or build that doesn't have incredible AoE or crowd clear, such as pretty much anything you do with Scout aside from Plasma Splash Drac, I would recommend Thorns. It definitely helps a lot with mitigating those high damage swarmers sneaking through combat to reach you. Next we'll go on to active perks. You only get 2 of these, so you gotta be a little bit more wise with your choices. First of all, we have Berzerker. For 10 seconds, boost the recharge speed of your power attack on a 4-minute cooldown. Not a huge fan of Berzerker myself, although it lets you pump out a pretty significant amount of damage with power attacks in a short amount of time. Getting into melee range with most enemies on Hazard 5 isn't exactly advisable. That, and personally I always accidentally trigger this before I'm ready to. Probably not the best thing to get into Haz 5 with, although it definitely has its moments. Field Medic. This is a big one. Revive teammates 30% faster, inflicting a fear effect on a successful revive, and once per mission gives you an instant revive to use on a teammate, which also inflicts the fear effect. Yeah, I'd say this one's pretty baseline for anyone that's not super confident in their team on Hazard 5. The highest compliment I can possibly bestow on someone is whenever I play with them for a while and they make me unequipped Field Medic. This is one of the best perks for all classes. It shines especially bright on Scout, who can kite enemies away and then dive back in to get a revive, and fear all the enemies that might be left chewing on the person's body away, and give everyone time to reset, shoot some bugs, and get back in the fight. And also an instant revive that inflicts fear is nothing but a good thing. If someone dies on the way to the drop pod, you can instantly get them back on their feet and keep the momentum going, or you can use it as a saving throw in a bad situation where you desperately need someone's help in a fight. Which segues beautifully into our next active perk, Iron Will. Probably the staple active perk that everyone thinks about whenever they think of a must-have perk. Personally, I don't use it all that much, but it is one of the best perks in the game, and I'm not going to detract from that. So what does Iron Will do? Once you get down, you can hold the jump button to get back up. This can be done at any time after you go down, or once all dwarves have been downed, it will give you a 10-second timer to activate the perk and save the mission. You become invulnerable, reload all of your weapons, get faster power attack recharges, have increased melee damage, and move faster while resisting slows for 12 seconds. This gives you time to resupply, revive someone else, find some sugar, get a vampire proc to keep yourself alive, because if you don't get any source of healing before Iron Will ends, you will go back down again. So seeking out health is just as important as saving someone else. If no health is available, prioritize reviving someone. However, if you're running the vampire perk, you can use the bugs that presumably killed you to get some health back and stay in the fight. Your teammates will certainly thank you whenever you save a losing mission with Iron Will. Heightened Senses. Whenever an enemy is about to grab you or is targeting you with a grab, the top of your screen will glow white, and additionally, once you're grabbed 2 times in a mission, you'll be able to kill the enemy that's grabbing you, breaking yourself free of the grab. I will mention that there's a 5-second cooldown on this effect, but it's not really relevant in most situations, as I don't know if I've ever been grabbed 2 times in less than 5 seconds. This perk stands out especially well on Scout, as well it's a stigma for Scouts to run ahead and get killed. Scouts definitely do their best work whenever they can run into a room and clear out some high threats without worrying about being snagged and rendered inoperable and an inconvenience for the rest of the team. Heightened Senses never leaves my build for 2 reasons. 1, I'm a speed player. I tend to run ahead, not to anyone else's detriment, but if I do get snagged by a cave leech, I don't want to ruin everyone else's fun by going down. And secondly, I like to listen to music while I play, so the odds of me actually hearing a leech before it grabs me is slim to none. So having the advanced warning system and being able to break free when I do get grabbed is pretty much mandatory for me. Your mileage may vary, but the way that I play the game, which is probably not the smartest, Heightened Senses is very valuable for me. Shield Link. Passively, whenever you're within 4 meters of a teammate, both of your shields recharge 50% faster. Note that your shield still doesn't start recharging until the same delay has passed, which ranges from 6, 7, to 9 seconds depending on your armor loadout. But if you're using the loadout that I use for Hazard 5, it'll be 7 seconds. Additionally, whenever you're within 4 meters of a teammate, you can reach out and interact with them to boost their shield to 300% of its normal value for 30 seconds. This ability is on a 2-minute cooldown, which is very nice and forgiving as you'll often use it accidentally. However, when used in a clutch moment or right after you revive someone, it can be very useful. I don't run Shield Link really at all myself, but whenever someone boosts my shield, I can say that it's very helpful. Dash. This is the big boy. I'm sure most of you knew this was coming. When you activate it by double tapping the sprint key, it boosts you forward and continues to accelerate you while you're on flat ground for a short amount of time. This cleanses all slows from you, so if you're stuck in goo, snow, or caught by a slasher, you can dash out of it. This has a mere 25-second cooldown and unlimited uses. In addition to being incredibly useful in combat for getting yourself away from enemies and making space, which is what most people say makes this a crutch perk, it also helps greatly in your traversal, allowing gunners and drillers to jump across large gaps, as well as engineers to do some of the coolest platform jumps that you'll ever see. This is essentially a must-have perk on every class but Scout, and on Scout, I really don't think you should ever take it just because you have so many movement options already, especially if you have Special Powder unlocked. Beastmaster. Getting close, you can hold the interact key to charm a Glyphid Grunt, Glyphid Guard, or Glyphid Slasher. This effect is on a 5-minute cooldown, but can't be activated again until your previous Steve dies. And due to there being no way to tell if your Grunt is still alive or not other than visually looking for them, sometimes this can lead to you approaching Glyphids in an attempt to charm them, not realizing that your previous Steve is still alive, and getting slashed in the face for your efforts. Steve has a bad tendency to get stuck on terrain, such as dirt walls that people have dug through on mining missions, or he can just run off into the corner and fight an oppressor to the death. Steve is absolutely dominated by ranged enemies, especially flying ones, and exploders. Any flying enemy will be completely ignored by Steve, even if it appears to be within his reach. So it's your responsibility to protect this bug. See where I'm going with this? Additionally, exploders absolutely decimate Steve, so bringing him on an exploder infestation will absolutely destroy him, and the amount of exploders that spawn just on normal Has 5 missions will make Steve a questionable pick at best. He's a cute little lad, but leave him in the lower hazards. See You in Hell. Gives you a passive ability that anytime that you are struck with a melee attack, you will deal more retaliatory melee damage in return. So if that grunt slaps you, slap him right back. This also affects drillers' drills, so it can be quite effective when surrounded by low damage melee enemies. However, being surrounded by any amount of enemies on Has 5 is a questionable decision at best. And the active effect, 3 times each mission whenever you're downed, you'll be able to release a massive neuro pulse explosion, dealing 666 damage to all enemies unfortunate enough to be close to you. You'll also leave a residual fear effect around you that will prevent more enemies from getting close to you. This is extremely useful for people that don't have field medic or don't have any other way to mitigate the enemies around you, such as gunner shields. A well-timed See You in Hell explosion can do pretty large damage to high threat enemies, so it shouldn't be taken lightly. However, while field medic and Iron Will are planning for failure, See You in Hell is planning for sandbagging. Wouldn't be my first or 5th pick for an active perk, but it's still respectable. And last and least, Hover Boots. Now I kid a little bit. Hover Boots is massively overhyped in the community as being this end-all be-all save for fall damage in this game, and I think this is the only time I'll say this. Get good. Honestly, as much as you should look at the ceiling for leeches, you should look at the floor for holes. And sure, things will happen. You'll fall down holes and die embarrassing deaths, get knocked over cliffs, or launched into the air by oppressors, but as you learn and improve at the game, these will happen much more few and far between, to the point that Hover Boots will be a wasted active perk slot. If you're falling to your death on Hazard 5, you're going to be falling to your death on Hazard 3. Fall damage has no scaling. But you're also going to have to contend with the bugs in Hazard 5, so you should take some perks that assist you in combat. Hover Boots burning enemies when you hover over them is not combat assistance before you say that. There is something to be said about using it to mine into the wall as Scout, but even then, I think that you can perch yourself on top of a Nitro Vein very effectively without engineer platforms, and the only thing you really need to dig yourself a hole into the wall for is Morkite, which is a one-hit mineral, which you can easily do in one swing up once you get the hang of it. Hover Boots is like Deep Pockets. It's a Vice perk, except it's not any good. I kid, mainly. But if I see you using Hover Boots in my game, I'm gonna judge you very harshly. All of this considered, and the fact that you have to hold the Call Mule button to activate it, at a moment's notice when taking a lethal fall, I don't think this is a very reliable way to activate it. If anything, it should be hold jump or mash the jump key. I don't know. The Call Mule button seems very inappropriate for what this perk does for you. But if you feel targeted by the harassment of gravity, then maybe Hover Boots is the perk for you. In conclusion though, here's the best perks I think you can possibly take as someone trying to get into Hazard 5. You can get away with running whatever perks that you want, but these are going to give you the best chance of success. But that's about all I have for you today. Next up will be the weapons for each class. I'll be posting a poll that'll allow you to vote for what class you'd like to see first, although we are going to go through all of them. If you want to catch me live, I do stream over on Twitch. If you want to flame me for running It's a Bug thing for the last 1,000 hours, you can talk to me or my community over on Discord. And as always, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.